Welcome. This is the Wyoming Tribune Eagle editorial board interview with Rocky Case, who's a candidate for Cheyenne City Council Ward 3.
Correct.
Welcome,
Thanks
Mr.
for
Case.
having me.
Appreciate you your interest in running for office and for coming and interviewing with us today.
Yeah.
For those watching the video at home, I'm Brian Martin. I'm the managing editor of the Wyoming Tribune Eagle, and we have a couple of community reps from our editorial board with us.
I'm Sharon Fain with Black Hills Energy.
Great to meet you.
Bob Feck, Cheyenne Shelter.
Great to meet you.
Well, Rocky, again, thanks for being here. And let's start with what specific issues or concerns caused you to run for the city council this year?
You know, I think there are a host of issues that the city faces, and I think if you try to tackle every one of them, you will probably wind up not accomplishing any of them. That said, I really believe that blight is a major issue in our city, not in specific spots, but throughout. And I also believe that that there are huge areas of opportunity in the downtown, not just for development, but again, the blight, the empty buildings, the property owners that just don't seem to take an interest in helping the downtown develop to where it can be a place of enjoyment, not just for the business community, but for recreation. And I also see parks as a major issue. As a matter of fact, on my way here, I took a walk through Martin Luther King Park, and I think that there is a lot of trash, a lot of things left behind by whether, you know, I don't want to pick on certain individuals within the community, but the transient population that leaves behind empty liquor bottles, clothes, half-eaten food, et cetera, things like this. I think our city needs to be cleaned up. I think it can be an excellent place to live. I think there are areas of opportunity community-wide that we as a community should come together and help to fix.
So when you mention cleaning up the parks, the primary purpose of government is to provide essential government services.
Absolutely.
Have you defined in your mind what are essential government services, what are second-tier services, what are third-tier services?
Yeah, clearly the safety of the public is at the top of the list when it comes to those services that the city should provide, a safe community. And, you know, there are secondary and tertiary issues. I believe that generally speaking, Cheyenne is a safe place to be, right? But I also believe that that blight and that trash and those extra things attract elements that may contribute to an increase in whether it be criminal activity or a reduction in that safety. In other words, I heard it once where if you leave a bathroom very clean when you leave it, the next person that comes in is going to likely leave that bathroom clean too. But if you just leave a little bit of trash, the next person is going to leave a little bit of trash, and then it's just going to compound on top of that. So that, yes, that said, public safety number one, no holds barred. But then when and of course we need to find the budget to accomplish these things. How does that happen, particularly when we're facing an economic decline because of the oil and gas and energy industry and dollars that the state trickles down to the city? We need to be very cognizant of that. However, when you start to reduce revenues, those streams either need to be replaced or services reduced, one or the other. And the city council needs to take a very tactful approach in accomplishing those.
Rocky, what qualifications do you bring to the table that you think help you to will serve as an effective councilman?
Right. So a few things. I have had the opportunity to work for three pretty interesting organizations, two multinational corporations, and one was a very small company in Grand Junction, Colorado. I still lived local at the time, where I was responsible for a very specific plastic product line. That said, what does that mean? So I've had these jobs. I see that no matter what you go out to accomplish, you need to have a plan to get there. you need to have a plan at the outset that goes A to Z. Obviously, there could be changes within that plan as you go through it. But if you don't have a coordinated plan that includes, let's use the analogy of an office, for instance. You first see the receptionist, and then maybe you're closing the piece of business with the CEO. There's a whole host of people in between that are responsible, and every one of those needs to be lined out, right? In order to successfully complete a project or an idea or a service with excellence. If one of the components falls down, the whole project is not going to come together like it should. So I have the experience of doing that. Whether, right now I run a territory in the pharmaceutical sales industry. I'm the guy on the street. So I'm the receptionist and the CEO, if you will, and everywhere in between. I've got my budget. I've got my accounting. I have my marketing. I'm responsible for bringing that all forward. So that level of experience applied to the city council and the thought process, if you will, to bring an idea, project, or concept to production, cradle to grave. Does that make sense? Also, I do have, in my educational background, I have a Bachelor of Art in Political Science with a minor in history. And what does that kind of bring? So, you've got this piece of paper that you worked hard for. Well, it's a very analytical degree, political science. You need to analyze each little component as to what's going on, what's driving, what's happening here. What are the components underneath that are bubbling this to the top? So the analytical piece as well.
Rocky, so what do you believe is the biggest challenge facing the city, if you could name one or two?
Well, I think there are a lot of dollars flowing south to Colorado. That's a big challenge. What are the amenities that we can offer? And again, we face budget crisis, not crisis right now, but budget shortfalls right now. So it's kind of a twofold. If our dollars are going south, right, how do we keep them here? And we talk about whether it be a children's museum or the accessible parks or all these great ideas. I think that Cheyenne can be a community of excellence. I think right now there are huge areas of opportunity, and a lot of our dollars are exiting the community when I think we can capture them back here with forethought and putting amenities in place to keep people in town. That's a big one.
What type of amenities would you suggest?
Well, fair question, absolutely. And let's face it, our weather is kind of crummy for 6 or 7 months of the year, right? So I look at indoor opportunities, not just for the youth, but for adults as well. And how can the city offer those amenities? The Children's Museum, I think, is a great idea. I don't know what the city's role as government is to bring that to the fold. A rec center, fantastic. I mean, you look at communities throughout Wyoming, they have them. Again, what's the city's role? How can we bring that? But that goes back to all the dollars that are exiting Cheyenne. People are going to Colorado. If you've been there on a weekend, you see the traffic heading south. We need to capture people coming into the community, get them to stop here, as well as keep people that live in this community here instead of going to Colorado on the weekends for whatever activities those are.
Well, I'm going to kind of jump ahead because you've mentioned this twice now. The Children's Museum and the Rec Center. Your statement has been, what is the city's obligation? So from your perspective, what is the city's obligation? Does the city build a rec center? Is this a ballot issue for 6th penny? Is there a Children's Museum 7th penny? Do you support those?
I think that the rec center should be brought forward on a ballot initiative as a 6th penny again. I know it's failed a few times. I think it should be brought forward again. The reason said, I don't think that the project was served up to the community in its entirety as to what's the community going to get for these dollars. So that needs to be brought, in my mind, forward as a 6th penny. The Children's Museum is interesting, and I was thinking about this morning. It started as I believe, not-for-profit organization. And now they're coming to the table and asking for potentially tax dollars to fund the project. Otherwise, it's going to be, you know, a very small museum compared to a very beautiful, you know, the architecture and everything else, so forth. For $12 million is a lot of money. They brought it forward as a not-for-profit. I look back to what at the time was the Icon Center, or then the Taco John Center, and now is a city-owned ice rink. Started in a very similar way that the Children's Museum is beginning. They found it not to be profitable. These kind of things probably aren't profitable. However, they're great in terms of keeping communities together. The city stepped in and took that over. So there's a precedent set in terms of the city helping with these kind of projects. Now, is the 7th penny or a quarter of a penny the right way? I don't know. I think it's a tall order, though, for, I believe the price tag for the not-for-profit Children's Museum is $12 million. That's a tall order for a nonprofit in Cheyenne, Wyoming. So does the project get reduced and the city step in, or can they raise $12 million? That's a tough one to explore.
So if the rec center gets built as a 6th penny project, and then 10 years from now, 5 years from now, it cannot generate sufficient income to cover maintenance costs, would you then support city money for long-term payment of staff or maintenance of a facility like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do, because of the benefit that it brings to the community if it's thought out. You know, I don't want just a swimming pool. A swimming pool, we have a great swimming pool. We have you know, more of a blue ribbon swimming pool that can attract, I don't want to say larger statewide swim meets, things like that would be great. But it needs to cater not just to one segment of the community. This needs to cater across the board from infants through, you know, I mean, what's the average age of death now? 75, 80, whatever it is. It needs to cater to a broad spectrum of the community. And if it does that, absolutely it should. But if it only caters to one segment, no.
Rocky, before we drill back into some more specifics, I want to back up and have you share your vision for Cheyenne. What is your vision for Cheyenne? And then what do you think that Cheyenne, besides the rec center, doesn't have that it needs to have to be a vibrant community?
Yeah, so these are things that I have not explored as to what the obstacles are. So I don't know how we get there, right? I will when I'm on a city council, hopefully prior. But I think that our dining opportunities, particularly in the downtown area, are, you know, less than stellar. You've got a handful of options. What are the options of, say, a Noodles and Company or a PF Chang or some of these kind of, not higher end, but higher end fast food restaurants? What are the obstacles of attracting those to the community? There's a reason they're not coming. They're in Fort Collins, right? They're all up and down the Front Range. What are those reasons? If there are obstacles that are in place, whether it be ordinances, whether it be components of Plan Cheyenne that they don't see it fits their corporate image, however that is. That's just one that, you know, if there's restaurants downtown, right? We have some great ones, don't get me wrong. The options are limited. So I think downtown being the hub, right? Del Range, everything's full. There's very few vacant properties on Del Range. But Del Range is not a community center, right? That's my opinion. It doesn't bring the community together. So we have a rec center. We have a downtown community, a vibrant downtown community that people are proud of, proud to go to, feel safe in the evenings, walking around, in the daytime, anytime. Maybe an example. That's another one. We talk about, I don't want to single this out. I'm not exactly sure how we deal with this issue. But the homeless population that are working for a hand up, whatever community center they're going to in the evening, they're going out and working and doing something that hopefully make them better long-term. We have a high transient population. The other day, I was accosted, if you will, getting my daughter out of her car seat in front of a bus stop. And this guy comes up and clearly a transient, clearly had quite a bit to drink. And all he said he wanted was 35 cents. Well, of course I said no, tried to walk away, but I'm getting my daughter out of her car seat and I'm backed in. I'm like, this is unacceptable. They're just camping out in the bus shelters. They're camping out in the tents at the depot downtown. They're camping out in the park shelters, and they're very aggressive. I think there are huge areas of opportunity to move them along. Right?
You mentioned the future of downtown, including some things you'd like to see, but are there other specific amenities besides restaurants, other things that you think downtown needs to have to be successful?
I think if those come into place, hopefully, there's plenty of empty office space in downtown. But again, I think somebody mentioned the Z's building earlier. What's to incentivize those property owners to occupy the space? Right now, I don't see any incentive to occupy the space. I don't know what their, incentive is to keep it empty either. But if we get a few anchors downtown, again, it's leaving things clean. Once we have a few anchors, things should expand and grow on that naturally and organically.
The next issue is the Belvoir Ranch that the city owns. What do you think should be done in terms of development of the ranch, and how aggressively should that be done?
I think, again, that's a budget issue that it's a great asset that the city has. It needs opened up. How do we get there? Again, considering the budget issues that we face, it needs opened up though. I kind of chuckled when I read the article about that the other day in the morning, and something like 125 people got to go out there, and which I think is great, to do a biodiversity kind of study and et cetera. Why can't I go out there and ride my mountain bike on the trails? So I can't the guy, go ride his horses, all of these things, go out and picnic his families. I think that the Belvoir Ranch can be a great asset to the community. I can't say that I was for it when it was purchased, but that's finished. That's done. The city owns it now. So let's make it a gem of the city. Let's make it an attraction. My understanding is that you can, if it were opened up, whether it be by bike or horseback or so forth, get on into Colorado, and it kind of becomes a recreational corridor for both states. And I think that's fantastic.
You mentioned that it's a budget issue. So where does that fit in your priorities? And then what are your priorities for spending city money? You mentioned that public safety is key, but what kind of things are your budget expense priorities, and where does savings fit into that?
Savings fit in. I think that we explore grants, we explore funds. I was talking with this current city council member, and there are a host of outdoor outfitters, if you will, that have said, we'll donate X, Y, and Z to the Belvoir Ranch if you get it open. That's one of the current council members. Richard Johnson is his name, and there is opportunities for grants, opportunities for donations, et cetera. So when we talk about the Belvoir Ranch, I think it can be developed to an accessible, place that the community can be happy to go and enjoy without a lot of dollars if it's explored properly. So in terms of Belvoir Ranch, that's what my approach would be. I think there's a second part to that question though that I might not be hitting on.
Your budget and spending priorities for the city, what would you consider to be your priorities for spending and for saving?
The hot topic right now is potholes, right? They're everywhere. Roads, safety, et cetera. I'm not advocating that we spend an enormous amount of money to go fight potholes, but if we look at civic engagement, I think it's incumbent on the local, the guy that lives out in front, that has the pothole out in front of his street, to call the city and say, hey, I got this pothole. So it's not just that city's problem. And terms of budget, public safety, there are holes in the police department. I understand we're 2 or 3 short. Those need filled. We've got a great public building now that houses a lot of the city services. I think that's fantastic. I guess to answer your question, number 1 is public safety, number 2 is roads, infrastructure, et cetera. And then if there are leftover dollars, these amenities can start to come in. But if we recruit businesses and we make it a business-friendly community, that increases the tax base, right? Just a thought.
I believe right now I'm gonna stick to the roads for just a minute.
Okay.
Since that's your number 2 priority. I believe the current city budget calls for about $4 million a year in road regeneration or improvement. And I believe Vicki Nimchek's estimate for the actual cost that the city needs is somewhere around $7 million. So there's almost a $3 million annual shortage just for the city of Cheyenne. That's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
Where, if you had to, would you cut back other city services to provide that funding?
You know, I think efficiencies are, I'm going to say inefficiencies aren't always evident. Okay?
Okay.
And if inefficiencies can be found through exploring, you know, departmental functions, if inefficiencies can be found, that can often translate to more revenue back in the general budget. So I really feel, and I guess I wish I would have hit on this a little bit earlier, that someone, something, somehow, some way, the city processes within each department need to be explored to find those inefficiencies. And if they're found, consider how they can be made more efficient to put up extra dollars back in the budget to fill those gaps. That would be one way to help.
Rocky, you mentioned the 6th penny with the rec center. The city's in the process of building a priority list right now for the next 6th penny election, which is probably going to be early next year.
Right.
What are your personal priorities for projects that would be funded by the 6th penny sales tax?
Well, I think number 1, rec center. And I want to, you know, again, that needs to be, if that is on the list, it needs to be very clear what that project is. Okay. I'm not exactly sure this children's museum should be on that list. And I got to be honest, I guess I need to do a little bit more research to see what those items are on that list in order to prioritize, right? Is that fair?
Sure, absolutely. Want to make sure to ask you about, we have about, looks like about 5 minutes left. Anti-discrimination ordinance, do you feel that one's needed for the city of Cheyenne?
It's definitely a hot topic, and whether it be nationwide, statewide, states' rights, it's definitely an issue. I'm not aware of any discriminatory practices that have happened. That said, I feel that there are federal laws on the books that take care of that and are tight enough that discrimination should not happen, period. That said, if there are instances of that happening, I guess I don't see what the harm is in having it. In other words, I feel that there are federal and state laws that take care of it. I don't see the point in doing it, but I also don't see the harm in having it on the books.
Would you vote for it?
I guess, yes. I think it becomes just an arbitrary law, though, because again, you have the state and the federal laws that supersede anything the city does. So does it become something like the spitting ordinance that's just on the books to be on the books, right? That's 100 and every how many years old. Now, of course, this would be, so let me explain this further. Discrimination should not happen. I believe there are laws in place that already, there are already channels for people that have been discriminated against, no matter what, to grieve their case. But again, I don't know that an ordinance is going to do the city good, but I would support it just as a matter of moral obligation.
Rocky, when you were talking about Martin Luther King Park, and you mentioned the bathrooms, there's actually, it's called the broken windows theory.
Okay.
And there's been a lot of papers done on that, but the city funds, either from general fund or fifth penny or sixth penny funding, a number of nonprofits that support a lot of our lower income population.
Sure.
Do you believe that that is appropriate, that funding occurs up? And it generally occurs through the United Way. Funding goes to United Way distributes it out to the different agencies. What do you think of that?
No, I think that's absolutely important. And it's great that individuals that need a hand up, that those funds are there. Absolutely, 100%. But I also think that it should be taken a step further. Okay, we're going to translate these dollars so that we can help you out, but what are you as an individual going to do to continue to help yourself get further along the line, further up the ladder, right? I'm not saying we need to hang a carrot out in front of everybody. It's, it's all about the kids, right? They didn't make the decision to get in this situation they're in my mind. But yeah, absolutely. Distributing dollars appropriately to individuals that need a hand up, I'm all for that.
Any other questions from the board? Rocky, as we wrap up, any other things that you wanted to touch on that we didn't address with our questions?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground, and it was great to have the opportunity to discuss this with you guys. I appreciate the invite.
Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.